It's very nice to see you, Heidi. And thank you very much for doing this interview. I'll just introduce you to our audience.
Okay.
Dr. Heidi Keller is Professor Emeritus from the Faculty of Human Sciences at Osnabrück University in Germany. She is also currently Director of NEVIT, the Greenhouse of Context-Informed Research and Training for Children in Need, and associated with the Paul Baywald School of Social Work and Social Welfare and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in Jerusalem. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Heidi, shall we start with, if you could tell us a little bit in general about your academic work and your special interests?
Yeah. As you can imagine, when I went to university, things were completely different from today's functioning. So it was a relatively open system with little instruction and also little guidance. For me, this was the ideal environment to develop my own interests. Working with families who had children, started videotaping in the family in the natural context. So a little bit against what was developing in psychology with this more experimental approach and more quantifiable things. I was very much interested in observing behavior and observing it in its natural context. And so rather broadly, the topic I'm mostly interested in since that many years is children's development in different cultural environments. Try to understand what is important for people in other environments, what are the contextual dimensions that play a role.
You began your field studies in Costa Rica, and in recent years, you have also been working with Indian academics in the field of family studies and child development.
Oh yeah, I have a long-standing working relationships with several Indian colleagues. In the context of these international conferences, I met Professor Saraswati. She was the most eminent Indian psychologist known in the West. I know there was also Professor Ananda Lakshmi, whom I also had the privilege to meet a couple of times. Professor Saraswati was and is a very remarkable personality and an academic. And she was also interested in children's development, and she had done research. And I had the privilege that she invited me to become a neuro chair professor at Baroda University. And I don't know how many times, but for many, many years, I went every year to India and spent weeks, 2 months in Baroda and traveled the country. And
I see. So you have actually been to Gujarat.
I have been in Gujarat and started working in the villages in Gujarat also, and also in the city. So I brought my students also there, and we had wonderful working relationships with Professor Mohite, with different colleagues there who supported me and helped me to get local students working with me. And one of these times I also met my good friend from Delhi, Nandita Chaudhary, with
Yes.
whom I then established working relationships that last already also, I don't know, 20 or more years.
So let's talk a bit about that because
Yeah.
those watching this interview might be interested in knowing that Dr. Nandita Chaudhary, to whom Dr. Heidi Keller is referring, also comes from the field of family studies and child development and psychology, and she retired from Lady Irwin College after 3 decades teaching this subject and publishing extensively. And one of the issues that Nandita Chaudhary and Heidi Keller have explored extensively together is that of this theory, this attachment theory, as it has been developed in the field, and its implications when it's applied outside of a Euro-American context. For our audience, could you just begin with a very brief description of what attachment theory is?
Yeah, attachment theory is the most popular theory of social emotional development. It was created and first formulated by John Bowlby, a British psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, the most the development of the attachment relationship is based in sensitive caregiving, that is reacting to children's needs promptly and immediately, and having children taking the lead, so not interfering, not structuring, but just following the slightest cues that children signal. And that with around 1 year of age, there is this bond established, and that has consequences for the whole lifespan. So the quality of this early relationship is influencing later development.
Since most of our audience is non-academic,
Yeah.
if you could explain to them, I mean, most cultures would have some kind of idea that the mother is very important to the young baby, and that a caring mother would respond or try to understand the baby. But what you and Nandita have argued is that this presents a very narrow vision of childcare, and it does not even adequately represent the variation in the West. And it also pathologizes. I'm reading from an article which Nandita and Heidi jointly published in the Sunday Guardian here in India. It pathologizes a majority of the world's populations and promotes a culturally specific and historically limited pattern of bringing up children with, they say, a hint of moral superiority. So could you explain to our audience, what this means, how this plays out in a narrow or biased way?
Yeah, because this this conception of attachment theory claims universality. It is regarded as the best way to bring up children, no matter what the environment is, or the conditions are, or the social environment is. And it has all these hidden and implicit assumptions. Environments where other children are very important, where grandmothers are important, where a whole relational network is important, and not this fixation to one particular person with one particular emotional bond. And since this theory is regarded until today as superior to any other kind of upbringing, every other kind of upbringing is regarded as being a deficit.
So for example, what I'm hearing is that attachment theory simply looks at the interaction between the child and the caregiver, and doesn't look at the wider context or other relations. So for example, if, for instance, an immigrant child had been born in Germany, and had never met its maternal grandparents or aunts, except for a few phone calls or video chats or something, then would their bond with those relatives be considered of less importance than, for instance, a foster carer in whose care the child was placed for an extended period of time, say 10 months or so?
Yeah. Yeah, see, for attachment theory and this Western kind of middle class thinking, the actual presence of a person is important. Therefore, continuity is a term that you come across all the time. Children need continuity of persons with whom they develop relationships. And if a culture credits a high importance to relatives, in the case you're mentioning, the grandmother, even the child hasn't seen the grandmother, but culturally it's an important figure, that doesn't play a role in that kind of thinking, where only the presence and the actual interactional behavior is accounted for, the safety and the security, the feelings of safety and security that the child develops.
And this is the case even if these other people around the child are not related to it or don't come from the same ethnicity, religious or cultural background.
Yeah, that is one of the problems, not only in Germany, but in many, as you know, in many Western countries, in Europe, in the United States. So this Western system, as you said, which is even not 100% the best for many people in the Western world. It is taken as a deficit. See, a good example, for instance, is all these UNICEF programs, this World Health programs, World Bank programs. They have shifted their attention from the health sector to the parenting sector, and they train parents, mainly mothers, 99% mothers, in remote cultures with completely different social organization, in this Western kind of parenting, face-to-face contact, a lot of talking, mentalizing, and all these things that are special to that particular less than 5% of the world's population. That, I mean, if you see the figures, you see how crazy this whole idea is. How can
Yes.
95% of the world raise their children the wrong way?
Yes,
So,
for example, Nandita, and you write about how there's a lot of emphasis on playing and talking to the baby.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that there are in some African societies, that's just considered, well, crazy because a baby is not expected to engage in conversation, and playing is something that the baby does with other children.
Exactly.
And so this is very interesting about attachment theory. But can you tell us a little bit about your work with German Child Services? Yes, why don't you tell the audience about that
Yeah,
first?
I'm actually not working with German Child Services. I came across the whole problematic of how migrants are treated with respect to their parenting in the setting of early education. I was working also a lot in kindergarten and daycare centers, making observational studies there, and spend a lot of time in the institutions, and came across this same attitude that that families from other cultures were not only not taken seriously, but they were told that they were not caring well for their children. They were openly accused of being bad parents, bad mothers. And I said, this cannot be the case. How dare these kindergarten teachers to be such a judgment, such a
So
judgmental
judgmental. Mhm.
with other families and with other practices. And I started doing, and I still do lots of trainings and workshops and other formats with kindergarten teachers in the early education field in this respect. And this is how also some people in the child custody area came across my work, and they approached me. And so I'm getting contacted from lawyers mainly who are interested in these cultural differences and in different ways of upbringing, because they also have the impression that what is going on with the child service and this child welfare offices, that this is horrible. And so I'm collaborating with a couple of great lawyers who really take a lot of effort in helping mainly mothers, interestingly, in this respect. So I cannot.
Mhm.
I cannot say how the German system is in general, because there is no representative assessment. But there are many cases, and every case where the wrong decisions are taken and where children are tortured is one case too much. And there are thousands of cases, meanwhile documented also.
So, I mean, there have been some reports. I have a reference here to the Daily Sabah, which is a Turkish newspaper that often reports on these cases, because Germany has such a large Turkish immigrant community.
Yes.
And they say that the estimate is that the rate of seized foreign children is 3 times more than German children. We have seen this as a pattern in other jurisdictions as well, for example, in Norway. So can you tell me a little about the kind of assumptions and biases that exist, or what is it that makes immigrant families so vulnerable to these proceedings?
I haven't come across cases with Turkish families. I come across a lot of single mothers or families from African countries,
Mhm.
and also from Eastern countries.
Eastern Europe.
Eastern Europe mainly,
Yes.
yes, or Russia, Russian background. And it is this, it's mainly attachment based, because these evaluators and the judges and all the institutions involved, they kind of base their decisions in attachment theory. And so, for instance, a mother from Kenya who came as a refugee to Germany after a long journey with her child, she is not used to play with the baby. She doesn't have a conception. And it's also, she loses her face if she's sitting on the floor playing with the baby. And then she's asked to play with the baby, and these people observe this, and there is no question that this mother is unable to care for her child, and the child is seized immediately.
So
It's
they take
horrible.
babies. So just to understand, they take babies away just based on how they observe the mother and the baby playing with each other.
Yeah, these are these evaluators.
So just to understand, they take babies away just based on how they observe the mother and the baby playing with each other.
Yeah, these are these evaluators, which are nominated by the court, by the judges, and they sometimes they even don't see the mother and the baby. They study the forms and what is available in the written material, and often not only is the that their parenting skills are questioned, also they are pathologized. How do you call it? Pathologized. They are said that since you know, in many cultural contexts, it is even for a young woman, it is not allowed to look into an elderly woman's or higher ranking person's face. And it's also not allowed to be talkative and to explain a lot, and it's not allowed to express emotions. And these women behave perfectly according to their cultural code, but they are classified as, I don't know, schizophrenic or depressive, as serious psychiatrically ill, because they do not show the Western middle class way of social conduct. And it's a horrible discrimination out of other cultures. It's a big ethical problem, I think.
A big etiquette problem, manners, demeanor, how you present yourself. And these interactions between this expert psychologist and the family, in what language? I mean, is it conducted in the language that the immigrant is familiar with?
I mean, in many cases, not. In some cases, they have interpreters. And they even, in one case where I'm involved, it's a mother from another African, West African country. There is even a person whom the German Child Service trusts from that country, but often I also observe that migrants who want to get settled in the new environment, they overdo with respect to police.
Yes, they overcompensate.
Yeah,
it's a kind of internalized inferiority complex or nervous.
Exactly, and so this is no help at all.
There is this report, Family Rights in Germany, which has talked about these expert assessments. Yeah. And it says here that most judges believe that the best interests of the child would be protected just as well without the appointment of the expert. And that there is so much of a delay because of the appointment of these experts in the ultimate decision in these cases, that 70% of the judges believe that prolongation of the procedure is because of the expert is detrimental to the best interests of the child. And it also says here that often the expert's opinion is simply used to give legitimacy to judicial decisions, which might have been difficult or not justifiable in of themselves. So what can you tell us more about this?
But I mean, in most cases, I know these experts' opinion is being taken into consideration. But these experts, they are really bad. They don't know anything about cultural parenting. They don't know anything about what is really the need of a child coming from a different culture. What is a peer culture? They don't have any idea, and they base their evaluation on their stereotypes. And you know, what I'm doing on a large scale is I'm writing counter evaluations to these evaluations that the lawyer then tries to bring in. But it's such a, I mean, my impression is it's such a closed system. Even if you can crystal clear demonstrate that the evaluation is faulty and wrong and with scientific methods and full of pre-assumptions, they don't take this counter-evaluation serious.
This is another point which is made in this Family Rights in Germany report, which is that there seems to be a kind of alliance which forms between the judges and the experts. And
the institutions and the child services also. But we
so in effect, families are not given a very fair hearing then. There seems to be a systemic flaw in the process.
Yeah. That is this Wolfgang Hammer, he was the director of such a child service institute in Hamburg. And he is retired, and he has collected over 1,000 of these cases and has analyzed them and comes to the conclusion. And it's also my impression from my limited knowledge of, I don't have a base of over 1,000 cases, but it's also what I see, what I often cannot understand. How can they not see that they are doing wrong and that they are damaging children? They are destroying children's psychological life. And their main measure is separating the children from the mothers mainly. And no matter what, they take the children with the police out of the school classes, out of the kindergarten, even without informing the mother. It's horrible what's going on. And the children are, of course, crying and want to see their mothers and want to go to their mothers. And then they argue that they do not need to follow the Children's Rights Convention, that they have the better overview. It's a system that is, I don't know, I don't have words to describe it. It's just horrible. And you cannot believe what this report has provoked as angry reactions from the lawyers, associations. It's criticized because of its methodology and that it is not representative. But as I said before, he didn't want to give a representative overview. He wanted to show there are many, many, many cases where the German system is not working in the interest of the child, not to talk about the best interest of the child, not in the worst interest of the child. And they don't see it and they don't acknowledge it. They continue doing what they are doing.
We're now in the last few minutes of the interview. So could you, what is some advice that you could give to immigrant parents who are facing child services proceedings, and how can we, help, how can people outside help these families?
I don't know. It's so important that families find good lawyers, but often they cannot afford good lawyers. And so in Germany, as in many other countries, you have the right to have a lawyer, and then you get a lawyer from the state, but they get very little money. And for that little money, they don't do much. This one lawyer with whom I'm closely collaborating, she is putting so much effort in every case, which is not paid, because she feels this is injustice and she just needs to help, and she gets involved and on a humanistic way. I mean, there are not, I didn't come across many of those good lawyers, but it's also maybe a matter of luck to find somebody who is willing to put effort into the case, to take it serious. But I think it's very important to that people like you bring this to a broader audience, also abroad, so that, but that this, what you are doing is also visible here, so that people see here, this is how our system is being perceived. And of course, the politicians should become aware of all these things, but they are also not interested. They are happy with attachment theory. And in the case of this early education, we tried so much getting political influence. The people listen to me. They say, you are right. And then they go back and continue what they have always done. I think creating an audience, but even this report to which you were referring, which is kind of explosive material to the system, it is largely ignored. I do not know what to do else in order to get this into the public attention. I think if you and others from abroad can voice their perceptions about this, as you are doing, I think that is an important way.
Thank you. I well understand your frustration.
Yeah,
I believe that, there's also a sort of cycle in ideologies and political beliefs, and at the moment, attachment theory and everything associated with the current version of child services is on the ascendant, and
yeah,
the momentum is very much in their favor, and people are not very open to listening to a different point of view. But on behalf of all of us in the movement for justice from child services in India and abroad, thank you very much for your very compassionate and generous work. And you are a great inspiration and moral support to all of us. And we hope to keep chatting with you. And that is how we will reach a broader audience. And people ultimately are always willing to listen to the truth and to the good, but sometimes it just takes some time to display.
yeah, yeah.
So
Thank
thank
you
you
so
very much.
much. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care,
Bye.
Heidi. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.